it's Marley. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're taking a little bit of a break from talking about books, and we're going to talk about some of my favorite and least favorite movies that I watched this year in 2024. They didn't necessarily all release this year, but out of the movies that I did watch, I'm not going to mention any of the movies I would consider like mid-tier, but I'm just going to talk about the ones I think are really bad and you want to avoid, and the ones that I thought were the best. Just a disclaimer, this is totally just my opinion. You might have a really different taste in movies than me. I have done this type of video before. Last year I did a best and worst movies video, and I'll link that below as well if you want some further recommendations or want to see what my taste in movies is like. This year I didn't have that many bad movies, so I feel like we could just get into the worst movies first, get those out of the way, and then we can get into my favorite movies. Now, this has been throughout the whole year, so for some of these movies, I might not have the best memory of anymore, but I'll do my best. So one of the worst movies I watched this year was Madam Web. I was actually, ironically, so excited for this movie when I first saw the trailer. I think just seeing a female-led superhero movie is always just very exciting because they still are quite rare. So I was just personally very excited that we were going to have another like female superhero. You know, I was intrigued by some of the cast, but of course this movie did go on to become a meme of kind of how bad it was. And yeah, I definitely agree with those memes. Some of the actor choices were interesting. Some weird stuff was going on with the villain where I feel like they dubbed over his voice. The script itself was very like bizarre. It just was not the best quality movie. That being said, I feel like you can still have fun with it, but obviously objectively, like this was not the best. Another movie I was quite disappointed in was Miller's Girl. This starred Jenna Ortega and Martin Freeman. I guess I was mainly intrigued by this movie because I liked Jenna Ortega. I don't really know. I felt like it kind of seemed like it might be interesting, but it definitely didn't live up to that. Basically, we have our main character played by Jenna, and she is like a high schooler, and then she starts trying to like seduce her English teacher, Martin Freeman's character. It's definitely was like uncomfortable and just not really worth the watch. This is one that I feel like I don't remember super well. So if you were intrigued by it at all, I would just remove it from your list. It's not really worth watching and it's just kind of uncomfortable. Next movie is Mother of the Bride. I feel like I barely remember this movie, except I think it was like the worst of the worst. Like I want to say this is the worst movie I watched this year. Unfortunately, I was the one that picked to watch it on like a family trip, and so it did lead to multiple people having to sit through it. I think this is like about a couple getting married in some sort of destination wedding, and then it turns out like the parents of the couple getting married like were exes. It's a rom-com, but it's like one of the most poorly written rom-coms I've ever seen. Keep that in mind. Oh, next up I put on this list 28 Days Later, which some people might get mad at me for saying that, but this year was really my introduction to zombie film or zombie content. I had never really been into zombie stuff before, but I watched Walking Dead this year, and then in October we watched some different zombie movies. I forget if this is one that was like based on a previous movie and a reimagining or something like that, but I was just ultimately disappointed in where this movie went. So it was obviously like a zombie apocalypse story. We're mainly focusing on this one main character. He wakes up from the hospital. He's been in some sort of coma situation similar to The Walking Dead. I know Walking Dead took inspo from this. So he like doesn't know what's been going on. The zombie apocalypse, I guess it's been 28 days. Is that why it's called that? So we're seeing his perspective as he's seeing like what the world has turned into now that there are these zombies. He teams up with a couple different characters throughout the movie, and basically what the message ends up being is kind of like that men are scarier than zombies. Like actual men are like more worthy of being feared than like actual monsters. Which like I get what they're trying to go for, but it just became really upsetting to watch these men like assault the women. Like as a woman myself, like I just didn't really want to watch that. that. Like, I wanted to maybe escape when I watch a film, and it just was kind of like an upsetting watch. Anyways, and then lastly, I'm gonna say Teen Wolf. I am a big fan of the TV show of Teen Wolf, or I was when I was a teenager, but I had never actually seen the original movie. It was based on starring Michael J. Fox. So I finally watched that this year. I mean, it was not great. I feel like it was low budget. It obviously is outdated, being from like the 80s. Basically, if you don't know, it's about a guy who, when he starts going through puberty, basically it's like an allegory for puberty, he turns into a werewolf. We find out that like it's a thing that runs in his family, and we're just seeing how he's like adjusting to it, and how everyone in school starts like loving him because he's this werewolf, and kind of a typical story of how like fame and popularity can go to your head. Not what you'd expect, maybe, but yeah, I just thought this was quite boring and went on too long. Okay, now into my best movies of the year. We're gonna start with the ones I watched the longest time ago. So again, sorry if my thoughts are not super like recent. First of all, we have No Hard Feelings. This was the romantic comedy starring Jennifer Lawrence, and I forget the name of the kid that's in it, the guy, but this actually was so fun. And I feel like a lot of rom-coms lately, a lot of comedies are not really working lately. I feel like they are, you know, they're being made for streamers. The scripts are not really great, and they're just not really quality rom-coms anymore that have been coming out. But this actually was a really refreshing romantic comedy to watch. Obviously, Jennifer Lawrence is a really talented actress. We know this. The guy who's in it, I had never seen him before, but he was really funny and really cute actor to watch. I look forward to seeing him in more stuff. I just think it was nice to like finally see a genuinely funny movie and like raunchy kind of movie. So in case you haven't checked this out, I definitely recommend it. Next, I actually have Mean Girls the musical on here, which is interesting. I think I did just have a good time with it. I feel like this movie got a little bit of hate, like it got memed a little bit for being bad, but I feel like it's just an enjoyable movie. Obviously, the original is a classic, you can't top it, but I think the reason I was so kind of pleasantly surprised by this is I did actually watch the musical on stage here in Toronto, and I was disappointed with seeing the stage production. So I went into this movie not expecting much, and then I was actually pleasantly surprised because a lot of the cast was really, really great. Obviously, Renee Rapp was kind of like a standout as Regina George, and you know, I liked a lot of the cast that was in here. There were a few newer jokes. Thinking of Damien's karaoke number, there were definitely some like newer stuff that really worked for like the current generation, because obviously Mean Girls is like 20 years old or something, so it's a bit obviously for more of the millennial generation. But yeah, I feel like it's worth a watch. Next up's gotta be Iron Claw. I feel like it didn't come out this year, but I watched it earlier this year, and this was just such an emotional movie. Obviously, it is the one starring Zac Efron, a part of the wrestling family of a bunch of different brothers who were wrestlers, and it's based on a true story, and it's just so tragic. Like, this is a movie to put on if you want to be depressed, you want to cry, you know, talks about mental health, men's mental health, just what this family went through, and Zac did a really good job. It's a shame he didn't like win any awards or anything for this, because I really think he deserved it and had a great performance. Next up, I have Dune 2. Quite enjoyed the second movie more than the first one. The first one, I think I still liked it. I definitely found parts of it confusing and slow. This second one was a lot different. It was a lot more action-packed, which makes sense as both movies were adapted from the same book, I believe. So it makes sense the second part of the story would be a little bit more exciting. I am a huge fan of Timothée Chalamet, so I think he did great. A lot of the other cast, of course, was really great too. It just was a very exciting movie. You know, big budget, very epic. I was glad that I was able to see it in the theater as well. I feel like that always adds to the experience. So yeah, definitely a fan of this one. Speaking of epic, I of course really enjoyed Deadpool and Wolverine. This was the newest, I guess, Marvel movie, newest Deadpool movie about Deadpool, Ryan Reynolds, trying to resurrect Wolverine, because of course we know that he had died in Logan, and it basically is just a huge like Marvel universe movie, which I'm getting kind of over the multiverse content that we've been getting with superhero and comic stuff. I'm kind of over it, but I feel like this movie did it very well. It was really fun for someone who has watched all of the different, you know, X-Men movies, Marvel movies, which I have seen quite a lot of them. I've seen most of them, so it was fun for me to be able to understand the references. Obviously, it was hilarious. Yeah, Of course, this was going to be on the list. I don't know who wouldn't have this on their list of best movies for this year. Maybe something a little bit more surprising is I really enjoyed It Ends With Us. Despite the controversy surrounding this movie and with its cast, obviously we all know Blake Lively was not promoting this movie in the correct way, and I don't love that there was this beef with the cast and the director that came out afterwards. But despite all that, I did go see this movie and thought it was a great adaptation of the book. That being said, I read the book like 5 years ago, but from what I can remember of the story, I feel like they adapted it really well. Really got the story and point of it across, and I think all of the cast did really well. I know people were kind of making fun of Blake Lively and stuff, but I don't know, even with my dislike of her after all this, I feel like she still played the character well enough, and I think it was a good movie. It's too bad that there was this kind of negativity surrounding it. Ooh, another movie I really enjoyed was Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. This is the sequel to obviously the original Beetlejuice, and to be honest, I did not grow up watching that film. I just watched it in the last couple years, and I actually did not enjoy it. I think with the original, it's better if you grew up watching it and you have this nostalgic factor. So I wasn't expecting that much going into the sequel. However, I think the sequel was really, really great. There still are a lot of the original, characters and the same jokes, I guess, going on. Like, I think if you're a fan of the original, you're still gonna really like this sequel. But I think they did a really good job to like make the story better and modernize it for current day. So even if you didn't like the first one, I would recommend watching the second one. Then we get into my TIFF watches. So if you don't know, I live in Toronto and I actually volunteer and attend the TIFF festival every year, Toronto International Film Festival. The first movie that I watched, I absolutely loved. It was the opening night movie, and that was Nutcrackers, and this is starring Ben Stiller. This is a really heartwarming, like family-friendly comedy about Ben Stiller's character, who is like a grumpy businessman who ends up having to go take care of his sister's kids when his sister and her husband pass away. So he has become the guardian of these, I think it's 4 boys between the ages of like 5 to 10 years old, or 13 years old. I don't know how old kids are, but they are obviously grieving kids, but they're really acting out, badly behaved. They live on a farm, so it's really like crazy and chaotic when he first comes to take care of these kids. Because of how kind of cold of a person he is, he wants to just push them off to another like foster family or find another family to adopt them. And so that is kind of the plot of the film. And as you can imagine, he grows to love and bond with these kids over time. As I said, it's really sweet and heartwarming, but also very funny, kind of in an immature way. I will say that. I'm not a huge fan of immature humor, but obviously it worked for this movie, having these young boys in it. They actually are all real brothers in real life, and that is what inspired the director to make this movie, is he knew these kids and he wanted to make a movie about them. They're all very charming and funny, and they actually all dance as well. So there's a really great like dance number. That's why it's called the Nutcracker, is because of the ballet. I'm not sure when this is gonna come out, but whenever it does come out, I really recommend you see it. Another movie I saw at TIFF, and I believe it is out now, is We Live in Time, of course starring Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield. I actually went to the premiere again for this and saw them in person, which was really cool. Obviously these are just two really brilliant actors, and so putting them together in this character-focused, relationship-focused movie just was excellent. So this is about a couple, and we're seeing them throughout different stages in their life. It is not told in chronological order, so we're kind of jumping all around these different scenes that they've had together throughout their relationship, seeing when they met, then seeing, later, and jumping back and forth. Okay. I thought that was a really interesting way to tell the story. It kept you very engaged because you're really having to pay attention to like, when are we in time with these people right now? So there's a lot of heartwarming comedic moments. There's also a lot of seriousness. It will make you cry. There's a lot of heartbreak going on. It tackles, a lot of serious, sad topics, but overall, have to recommend this. Another TIFF film is Life of Chuck. This one actually won for the fan favorites at the festival. This was made by Mike Flanagan, who you may know as the creator of all of the kind of horror shows on Netflix, like The Haunting of Hill House and all those things. This is an adaptation of Stephen King's book or novella, I think, called The Life of Chuck. That might make you think that this is a horror movie, but it is not. So if you don't like horror, don't worry. You still can watch this, and I recommend you do. We start out in this kind of apocalyptic setting. The end of the world is happening, and all that our main character keeps seeing is this poster saying like, you know, happy retirement, Chuck, or like, you had a great life, Chuck. And it's just this man, I think holding a little coffee mug or something in a suit. And it's like he was some sort of business figure. So there's this mystery of like, who is Chuck? Why is this poster everywhere? Anyways, we end up finding out more about Chuck and seeing his whole life. And it was just like a very, again, heartwarming but heartbreaking story having to do with life and death. And there's a lot of dancing in this one too, if you like dancing. And my final film that I watched at TIFF was Emilia Perez. I believe this one is out now on Netflix. This is the one that stars Selena Gomez. This was quite a unique movie that I'm really glad that I watched. It was really confusing me at first because it is like a musical, but it's just not your typical musical. So you start watching it and you're like, what is going on? But we have our main character who's a lawyer, and she gets given this task by a cartel boss to like help them find a new identity, help them make this new transition into a new identity, transition from male to female, then just kind of the fallout kind of once this cartel boss has transitioned into a woman, what happens with her family, with her life. It's very dramatic, but very entertaining and unique, as I said. So yeah, I haven't heard people talk too much about this movie, but I would recommend it for sure. A movie that a lot of people were talking about that I do want to jump on the bandwagon for is the new Alien movie, Romulus. I have not really watched many of the Alien movies, but I did want to check this one out. And yeah, you can totally just watch this even if you haven't watched the other movies in the franchise. Obviously, we have like a sci-fi setting. These characters are in space and stumble upon this, I think, like abandoned ship that has, you know, some aliens on it. And so obviously it's like a horror sci-fi action story. There's quite a few actors in here that are, you know, up and coming young hot actors that of course it was fun to watch. And yeah, it's just kind of what you would expect from a movie like this, but it was very fun and very entertaining. Then maybe one of my favorite movies I watched, or maybe I was just really in my feels when I watched this, but The Wild Robot. This actually did premiere at TIFF, but I didn't watch it at that time. I watched it later. This is an animated movie based off of a book. It's basically about this robot who gets stranded in the woods. She's like an AI kind of robot, think Big Hero 6, and it is her job just to like help people. That's how she's been programmed. But she gets stranded in the woods and has to adjust to like living with these animals, not really having a purpose anymore. And then she ends up becoming the mother of this little baby bird. So it's very much like a found family story. It's just so heartwarming, but also made me cry like multiple times, like so much. Again, if you want to cry, then watch this movie. It was just so beautiful. Like, I cannot hype it up anymore. Please watch this. Another movie, I forget if it came out this year. I was a little bit late watching it, but it was The Challengers. I do wish this movie was gayer than it ended up being. I feel like based on what I was seeing online, I thought it was going to be a little bit gayer, but that's fine. It still was such an intriguing movie to watch. Sometimes it's just fun to watch a like dramatic, juicy relationship between these three people. It is about these two guys who are friends and they love playing tennis. They're trying to go pro. They start to both have a crush on this girl who's a really great up and coming tennis player as well. They both kind of shoot their shot with her. We see in multiple different timelines, like we're switching back and forth between present day and the past where we're seeing what happened with them. We're just seeing like the different relationship dynamics between the three of them, with the friendship, with the romance between her and the two guys, all building up to this big tennis match between the two guys. I think it was done really well. Obviously, it was a bit over dramatic, but just as I said, like so engaging to watch. I see why this movie was so highly talked about this year. All right, we're almost done, but a newer release that I watched that I really liked was My Old Ass. I think this was on Amazon Prime. This is a bit of a coming of age kind of rom-com story. We have our main girl who is a teenager living on this lake. One day she gets high with her friends and she has this really bizarre trip where she sees an older version of herself, which is played by Aubrey Plaza. Her older self is just giving her some warnings, giving her advice, you know, don't take your family for granted. Amidst those pieces of advice, she says, stay away from this boy Chad. And then what do you know, like the next day she runs into a guy named Chad. So yeah, we're just following the rest of her summer as she's grappling with what her older self, her old ass has told her. It was really cute, really funny. I feel like relatable for a lot of people. It's fun because it's a Canadian film made by Canadian people, took place in Canada, everything like that. So I think especially for the Canadian girlies, you're gonna have a good time with this. And then the final movie that I'm going to recommend, this actually also premiered at TIFF and has been at a bunch of film festivals, but I just watched it again more recently. That's Anora. So this is following a sex worker named Anora, and to be honest, going into it, I thought maybe it was going to be more serious in tone given that she was a sex worker. Maybe that was some stereotyping on my part. This actually is like a dark comedy, very, very funny and entertaining, and I really want to highly recommend it for wherever you can watch it. I really think you should. As I said, we're following this sex worker. She actually starts to get into an actual relationship with this rich guy from Russia. Sorry if there's a lot of background noise, by the way. There's some construction going on around me. And it just becomes like a really chaotic film. We have like a group of characters that's just trying to find someone. It's giving The Hangover. It's giving like a ragtag group trying to find someone. They're all kind of not getting along. It's very chaotic. I don't even know how to describe it, but it just was such a pleasantly surprising movie to watch. It was very fun. Again, more of a unique story, but also had, you know, a deeper message as well. And honestly, the romance in this movie, it was not the main part of it, but I really liked it. So yeah, those are my best and worst movies of the year. Definitely let me know what your best and worst movie were down below, or if you have the same opinions as me or different opinions. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Next week, I'm going to put out my best and worst TV show video, so subscribe if you want to see that next week. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of December, great rest of 2024, and I'll catch you guys soon in my next video. Bye!